Martin, the video's off, so you can take your shirt off if you want.
Actually, it's already off. That you have to know.
Oh, God. Oh, what is this show becoming?
And I'm back from a trip to Thailand, so I'm fairly presentable. Nice tan. It's a fact.
All right, video's going on. Cue the music. Hi and hello, watch fans, and welcome to another edition of The Real Time Show with me, your friendly neighbourhood watchmaker, and my co-host, Alan Ben-Joseph, who's going to be licking the boots of today's guest, who is Martin Frei, his childhood hero in the world of watchmaking. Don't worry, I'm going to edit that out. Probably. Maybe. Probably not.
It sounded great, though.
You can leave that in.
All right.
Martin, good morning.
Good morning, good morning. For you, it is also morning, I take it.
So I am in Amsterdam, and Rob, you are in Dresden?
Yeah,
today?
I'm in Dresden. Yeah.
Today. So we're all in the same time zone.
Yes.
Mr. Martin Frei, co-founder of URWERK. For our Dutch fans, that sounds very natural. Because we call a watch movement an URWERK.
All right.
With two U's, so it comes very natural to us.
Yeah.
I am super honored to have you on the show, sir, because you, together with Felix, your co-founder, Felix Baumgartner, are my youth horological heroes.
Wow, good. I mean, I like to hear that.
And this is no exaggerations. For those that are listening to us, know that we do real talks on the Real Time Show. You guys reached an amazing anniversary, quarter of a century this year. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
And for the young collectors or the new collectors that are new to watchmaking, they might say, oh, cool, URWERK is amazing, it's special, but why is it so innovative? If we go back in time, and this is my personal story, 1997, when you guys started, I was 17, 18. I obviously grew up in this industry like your co-founder, Felix, and you have this clean-cut vision when you entered the watchmaking industry. The only innovative thing back then for me was maybe Porsche design with IWC, starting to work with titanium, crazy watches, compass hidden under a watch, pushers pushed into the case, but nothing spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
Then my dad showed me the Antiqua by Vianney Halter, and then that sparked something in me. I'm like, whoa, you can show time in a different way. Subdials pushed apart. It piqued my interest for steampunk, but then I saw your watches. And that was my horological big bang that blew my mind. I'm like, whoa, it sparked my fascination for design, watchmaking, creativity, futuristic, and obviously we all liked Star Wars, Star Trek, and coming up, and I'm a bit younger, but grew up with that stuff. So I have been your fan since 1997. Unfortunately, still, I don't own an URWERK piece, myself personally. But you guys are very high up my holy grail list. So I'm going to shut up now. Thank you for coming on the show. I've been admiring everything you guys done. And within brands, I'd never like everything they do. In your collection, there is not one watch I wouldn't want to wear and own. So kudos to you, gentlemen.
Well, thanks a lot. That is a very nice compliment, of course. And of course that we did this fully on purpose, That's exactly what we like to inspire, or what we like to trigger, that people who see our watches and who somehow get to know our watches, feel that same fascination for what we are doing, that we feel, and that we can inspire people. And I think it's a question of when you work on a thing like this, you kind of like heat up the thing that you work on. That's what you enjoy most, doing it. And so the process of creating a timepiece is of course a really enjoyable work, even though you sometimes face problems and so on. But then normally that's the highlight moment for the engineers and also for the designer, because when you face a problem, you have to find a solution to resolve the problem. And it's somehow like a ping pong game, trying to resolve problems and trying to somehow make out of something that maybe at some point looks like a problem, make out of that somehow the next inspiration point. So it's a really enjoyable game, and of course we like to heat up these objects that we work on, so that this heat is felt. When you look at the piece or when you wear it, all intentionally, so to say.
For those that are not familiar with URWERK that much, Felix Baumgartner, third generation watchmaker from Schaffhausen, met with our guest Martin Frei when they both were going towards graduation in Switzerland. And if I'm correct, you studied with Felix's cousin, right? In the arts.
Absolutely, yeah. That was actually Christoph Träger, my artist buddy. We studied at the Kunstschule Lucerne, free arts. That's where we met, and he came from another canton, Graubünden, to Lucerne, and I came from Zurich. And yeah, somehow we got to know each other there. He studied already a year before. He started a bit earlier there, did the kind of the Propedeutikum, the first year. I did that in Zurich. But when we met each other, we understood each other very, very well. We also decided to live together. That was my first time living not with my family. It was kind of like really a new beginning. And we had our students, parties, and it was a really great time. And at that time also, of course, he introduced me to many other people, among them his cousin Thomas Baumgartner, and a bit later on, also Felix, the brother of Thomas. So I got to know the guys, and they were a bit different because they weren't artists; they were watchmakers, and they had really different ideas, and they were so focused on what they want to do. They had a very clear idea of that they want to actually follow the footsteps of their father, first of all. But later on, I realized that they're actually into the watchmaking world, knee deep. Grandfather was already a watchmaker, so they actually were in this situation, and not unlike myself, where you want to, as a young man, you want to somehow find out what your thing is. My father is also in the technical world, or let's say in the science world. He's an engineer in basic research, physicist, and so he was always confronting me with some real strange concepts of space and time, of course. So it's something that is familiar to me from childhood on. But I wanted to escape it a bit, and probably the reason why I chose art was a bit because you want to do it differently than your father or your predecessor, so to say. And same thing for Thomas and for Felix. They also, even though they were kind of like in the footsteps of their ancestors, so to say, with the watchmaking, but they wanted to do it differently. That's something that brought us together.
The beauty of your partnership is that Felix, real technical, real watchmaker, you came with a pure artistic view and design. You've set out that the mission of URWERK and the goal was to design and craft horological timepieces, blending tradition with futuristic vision.
Yeah, I would say at the beginning, the futuristic vision. This is something when you start creating something, it doesn't even necessarily only concern watches. That was for me something that they brought along. I was interested in time, basically. That was something that I was also busy with, but actually while editing film, time was actually my interest. It wasn't necessarily the watchmaking part of it first. So that strange notion of time, what is it? If you sit on an editing machine, at least that's how it was when you worked back in the day when I studied film. Actually, after the art school, I did the film, started film school, and so it is a strange thing that you have of course, what we do with photography, that you stop time and you take a picture of the moment. And if you do that, one after the other, you can then, of course, have all these pictures next to each other, turning, moving, and you have film. So it's kind of a strange kind of time machine that you create there. And I was experimenting with this. I built zoetropes, these machines, the early machines where one can, see how that principle, how that works. And it's such a fascinating thing. And when you work with film, you see that you can, spool back in time, or you can spool to the future. So you have this kind of a model that many humans are basing their the world upon. That is past, present, and future. You have this model actually in front of you, even though when you then later on when you study this, you discover that that's just a model and it's not the reality. However, I was busy with this, and when I got to know the watchmaker brothers, I of course thought, okay, they must know more about this. They must know more about time, because that's basically what they're busy with. That's what they indicate. That's what watchmaking is, dealing with. So I was starting asking them questions about that, and that's actually how we understood that we have somehow common ground. And it started, very much like on this level that we were interested in concepts. So that's also why we then later on started with the time indication that works slightly different, than what we know. So you study as a child when your parents introduce you to time, to that concept, or you'll just learn it even intuitively, even before that you understand it. But you learn it later on, looking at the time phase that we know. That's the hands, and it becomes like a pictogram in your mind, And if you do that differently, and that's what we started with our time indication, then you already have a kind of like a surrealistic situation, where you indicate time differently. So somebody looking at it for the first time is puzzled and doesn't understand it. And so you already change a bit the perception, and you open the mind up for new concepts, regarding time. And that's very interesting, because it's a very philosophical notion. It's from the standpoint of the physicists, it's something that we don't understand. But from us human beings, of course, we deal with time. It's something that is very close to us, and that we need to orient ourselves. So there's a lot of questions that are fundamental that come into play when you open and start this discussion. That's actually what started our company, I would say. It's an experiment, finding out what is time.
Thank you for that philosophical discussion, because that's ingrained in the brand and everything you do. You guys have such a philosophical angle about time and watchmaking. You've mentioned Felix's brother several times. Is he part of URWERK today, or has he ever been?
Yes, he has been at the very beginning. He's not anymore with us, because we had at some point during our history, we had issues. Thomas, he was crucial, was super important. He's also the Baumgartner brother that I got to know first. He's a bit older than Felix. Felix, at the time we began with URWERK, he was really still very young, and he was still studying at the watchmaking school in Solothurn. Thomas was a very good, the best friend, so to say, and cousin of Christoph Träger that I talked about before, my artist buddy. And they had a common hobby, and that was actually looking out at record exhibitions. They were like these record fairs where they had these singles. And so they were actually totally into 60s punk music, and they would go to these record fairs to somehow dig out, bootleg records and singles. And so they would come home with a like a catch of records, and we also would sit together listening to this this cult music. And actually, that's how things began. We would just hang out together, listening to music, talking about time and things. And step by step, I got to know their world. And Felix would a bit later, as I said, would show up as well. He's a different character than Thomas. Thomas, he had these bipolar tendencies that later on became very important and difficult for him and for us. But he had, and that was something at the very beginning of URWERK that was super helpful and was super important, because when he was feeling good, he didn't see any limits. He could imagine just to talk to basically everybody, asking them, for support or for their interest or so. So he helped actually a lot, at the very beginning to start URWERK and to somehow connect us to our first clients. And so it was, in this sense, it was, even though it was his problem and his, in this sense, a disease, that he had to deal with, it was something that helped us a lot. But later on, this condition got more severe, and it just led to a situation where we had to stop working together, sadly enough. But so in an endeavor, in an experiment, or in the somehow in the run of your history, of your time creating something, you face many obstacles and many difficulties, and it's usually how you try to overcome these things, how you try to somehow use these moments to grow, or to somehow learn from mistakes and things, and that's somehow propelling you. So it could have been the moment that stopped. That could easily have been a moment that stopped. That would have stopped our project, but it didn't. And but it was in time it was very difficult. It was not what we wanted. We actually had the plan to do this thing, the three of us together, and that at some point was not possible anymore, and we had to somehow reorient ourselves and do it differently. But this was not the only time we faced difficulties. It's somehow part of it. It's guaranteed that you face things like this, I'll say.
Thank you, Martin, for sharing that beautiful and personal story. It's sad what happened to Thomas, but beautiful how the three of you embarked on this journey, and that his actually disease maybe empowered him to think literally limitless, because that's what you gentlemen did from day one and still do today. Going from one brother to the other, I think that Rob has actually a very interesting question. So, Rob, the mic is yours.
It's a very simple question. I just want to know that despite the fact that you and Felix came from very different backgrounds, you were united by shared values and concepts that have quite obviously gone on to form the perfect foundation of a long-term partnership. But what is it you like most about Felix as a person?
In general, if you meet somebody and it's possible to exchange and to somehow learn things, and exchange quickly, it's just always great to meet a good brain. Let's put it like this. It's a pleasure. And we, from the beginning on, actually, I started, or step by step, I started realizing that my collaboration with Felix is more intense and more fruitful, actually. That was something that I learned, that we can actually work very well together. And I'm not unfamiliar with this kind of say character, or this kind of thinking. Also the thinking of an engineer, and watchmakers are engineers. And Felix very much thinks like that. It's as I said already before. When there's a problem, usually that's the moment that the engineers come to life. And I know that from my father very well. So I understand this kind of thinking, that when there's something to resolve, or some issue to deal with, then the mind of an engineer starts to unfold its full capacities, and it's just brilliant to see how that goes. So you never actually when there's a problem appearing, you never look at it as something negative. This is the way to deal with it. And I actually met an engineer. Is the father of a friend of mine, and this friend of mine knew that I'm a big fan of the space program, and it's what I grew up with. In this, being born in 1966, it's something that I experienced myself, looking at this TV transmissions, of rocket launches and space Apollo space explorations and things, and of course also the science fiction films, but also the actual scientific explorations and things. So this friend of mine told me, you got to meet my father. And while I was living in New York, I met her father. And he's an Apollo engineer, Don Redke. He's a super cool guy. And, he told me a bit when I've met him, actually, not that long ago, last time in 2018. I was in Boston. I drove together with our American agent, Phil Ogle. I drove to Hartford, where he lives, somewhere in the woods. And he has like this big house, and the house is filled with memorabilia from his long time working for NASA. So he has been basically on all the programs like Apollo 11, the first moon landing, and also Apollo 13. And so he would tell me, for instance, about the situation there with Apollo 13. And we know this story. There was a film made later on, that actually pretty beautifully shows, that situation. And the Apollo program became boring a bit to many people. They have seen it already. It looked always a bit the same. Yeah, they make it to the moon. And it was actually an incredible achievement to make it to the moon without any trouble. And only the Apollo 13 showed that to the TV watchers, that there could be a problem, that there is a problem. So it was really, of course, much more interesting to watch, if there's something that goes wrong. But that was the moment. The engineers again had to somehow, think fast, and they had to try to resolve that problem that the astronauts faced, just to bring them back. So it was a question of life and death, and that was something, of course, that the TV watchers would experience. So they were, of course, drawn back into the story. But now Don Radke told me, because he was in the team of the lunar landing module engineers, he was creating stuff for the lunar landing module, the LEM. And I was always fascinated by that object, by that spacecraft, because it looked so special. It looked so strange. It's also a design thing that, it's almost like something basic for me. You look at it, you think like, what? This looks like some weird spider or something, and it's not like a regular form. It's kind of something weird. It's just form follows function, basically, if you look at it precisely. So there's a lot of things that I read in, looking at this object, but that's yet a different story. But they had to somehow bring these astronauts back, and they had a lunar landing module built on Earth, the engineers, where they could go into to find all the objects that existed exactly the same. So you had in space the original, so to say, but on planet Earth you had an exact copy of it, or an exact same object with all the things that were in the thing up in space. And so the engineers, they would sit in there, thinking about how to resolve the problem and see what objects they could use to somehow build that filter device that they needed to actually save the astronauts in the end. So it was the way he described it, and that's the spirit that I see with engineers in general, that I find fascinating, and that is also, in a way, how can I say, it's a way of looking at the world. You have, and artists share this, of course. You look at the world, you see the things that surround you, and it's just a beautiful thing that we have all these different objects, these different concepts, these different things, like if that's nature or culture, that we can study, during our lifetimes, and try to understand, how the whole thing works, So there's a lot of positive energy in the way the engineers look at the world, and that's something that I found with Felix, as you can find it with many engineers, but he's a really clear mind.
It's really interesting to listen to that kind of story, because as fans of watchmaking, we don't get to see behind the curtain very often. So we don't get to see the development process. We don't know what kind of problems you face in the early stages of a project. What was your Apollo 13? Which watch caused you the most trouble? And was there ever a project that came close to splitting the partnership in two?
That actually never happened, because it's really, as I said, it's if there's a problem, that's actually the moment you enjoy, most. So this is actually when it's high life, when there is a problem. But of course, with every project we ever did, that we had to face this. We also had certain projects that we started and we didn't finish because we just realized it's not possible, or we found out it's not cool, or so. But we invested already quite a bit of work, in order to do it. I'm sure we have about probably as many URWERK watches that we didn't do than the watches that we did. So that's something I've never talked about, in fact. But we did many tries that somehow ended halfways, but that doesn't mean that these tries are for nothing. These tries, they actually are super important. They give you ideas, of course, because of in the same kind of thinking or thought process where you learn from mistakes. So we had, for instance, maybe I can tell this anecdote. When Max Büsser, who was at the time still working for Harry Winston, asked us if we could do the next Opus project, that was the Opus 5, we had first a plan to start with a very, very complex idea. That's an idea that we had in our minds already for a while. It's kind of the watch would have been called Time Bandit, and it would have been kind of like a digital watch, where you have wheels spinning like with a slot machine, and you had a lever. So if you would trigger the lever, the wheels would spin, and then you push a button, and that would have stopped the spinning wheels, at the right time. So very difficult to do mechanically, and so there were some concept ideas that somehow led us to believe that it's possible, but we knew it's very difficult. And Felix at the time said, forget it, we don't have enough time to do that. It's just too complex. We also don't have the means to it. It's just forget it, we can't do it. But Thomas, who's still with us at the time, that was actually at that crucial moment, where we realized it's difficult to work together, because he somehow pushed it, even though it was not possible to do it, and didn't want to let go. And he's somehow... he was too optimistic about it. You see, so it's the engineer who also sees, that something is possible, or maybe something is not possible right now. This belongs to the skills you need, in order to do things. But the thinking about these problems, of course, brought us further. And I'm sure that at some point we will do that watch, and we also learned, of course. From thinking about this, and other ideas already sparked out of it. So you can imagine you have kind of like a pot with ideas that you fill up, in the course of time. You put these ideas in there, and you collect it, and so they become your cosmos. They become your field of toys, or so, And when it's about now creating a new watch, you go through these ideas. You have you see also connections between different concepts, and And then the first thing is not like, how does this new watch, how is it going to look? It's actually, what does the watch, what is the watch going to do? What is its job? How does it look at the world? How does it tell time? Things like that. And so you feed this, from these different concepts that you were thinking about already. And of course, then also some new ideas, things that you see in the moment, because I think the very moment that every moment starts anew is an incredible positive chance, that is always served to us. It's like it never had been before here. It didn't exist. But right now, it offers us the chance to do things very differently and in a way that was never here before. So no other human being than we now living at the very moment here had somehow the chance to face things the way they present themselves. And of course, that's not always only positive things, as we know more today than maybe in other times. But it's always a moment is always offering you unique chances to do things, and so you can at that very moment create. So that's that's that.
Amazing. And you actually answered one of my questions. One of my questions was your first professional public encounter and partnership with Max Busser was indeed in 2005 when you guys together made the Harry Winston Opus 5 collab.
Yeah, that was an important moment for URWERK, of course, because we, due to the collaboration with Harry Winston, invited by Max Busser, we had the chance to gain some attention. We had our UR103 watch ready at that time, and we were just thinking about the next step. So when we realized, okay, we can't do the Time Bandit, we said, okay, let's do our next watch, with Harry Winston. Let's do our 200 line. Let's start that one with the help of the Opus project. So our next watch, actually, our next URWERK watch was, in fact, the Opus 5. Something that we had in mind, we wanted to do, way to indicate time. When you look at the UR103, you have 4 satellites that we use there. And our first watches, they had only 2 satellites. There is a simple geometry that comes along with this this kind of time indication that we are playing with here. The hour that actually indicates the hour that indicates the minutes, and that is that you have whether you have 2 satellites and you have on these 2 you have the odd numbers on one and the even numbers on the other, or you have 3 satellites. With 3 you have a more open, a longer hour, and you have more space for the indexes. So in a way, the 3 satellites is the best way to do it. It looks very interesting, the concept, more interesting maybe than just 2. The 4 satellites, they make that hour more narrow. So you have these 3 possibilities, and we actually play with this indication and find always new new possibilities. But it was that very moment, where we had worked on this project for Harry Winston, that gave us some more attention also for our URWERK watches and for our own stuff. And that was very important for us, actually, to start. We had more light, with this project, and that's actually the moment when it started to develop in a more serious way, I would say.
That's an amazing story, very historic and important in watchmaking. Max Busser evolved from there, creating his own amazing brand, MB&F, Max Busser and Friends. 17 years down the line, you guys launched the Nitro watch, which is nicknamed the C3, H5, N3, '09.
That's right.
Would you mind sharing a bit about the watch and
Mhm.
how that partnership was and how it was to work together again 17 years down the line?
Since the days of the Opus 5, of course, we had a relationship with Max Büsser. We were busy, with our own project already for a couple of years, and he was working for Harry Winston, so he was there, kind of, he had some restrictions. He couldn't just do everything just exactly the way he wanted. Being part of the Harry Winston situation, he was at the crucial junction in a way. And I remember a talk we had in his car when he brought me to the train station at some point, where he was just before going to New York to meet the guys from Harry Winston, because he told me there that he wants to see if they somehow make him a part of the company, and if they won't, he will start his own thing. So he was a bit in between, and if they would have accepted his ideas, then the whole thing would have turned out a very different way. But they didn't, and so he then started his own ambient F project that he dared to do, I would say, because we already proved a bit, that's a way to do it, So he was inspired by us, and we were somehow helped by him. It was kind of like and it still is a relationship that we both profited from in our ways. And at some point, a bit later down the history lane, we actually had this concept, this idea to do a collaboration project, just to also emphasize our friendship, and our common goals. And we said, would be great, and that was really a time where that was not done, like a collaboration of two brands, to have two brand names somehow like sitting next to each other. That was actually originally my plan. I thought that would be great to have a watch that somehow shows two brands, on them, like so somehow this crossover. The crossover thing was already a notion that I knew in art. It's something that was done before, and it was something interesting to explore, in this Nitro project. And so the plan there was that we bring in something for this watch, and Ambient F, who was just the very beginning of their endeavor, or pretty much, and they would bring in something. And so because we had actually founded or began this project, this collaboration, with the idea to continue maybe later on with other ideas. We said, okay, first time, you do the design, and that would be Max Büsser and friends. You guys do the design with Eric as the designer, and we actually contribute the concept of the mechanism, the ideas of the movement. And actually, we had this concept already, thinking about the Wankel engine. It's a really intriguing mechanical concept, the Wankel concept. It's, of course, as a motor, it's interesting because it solves problems, but also as a mechanical, as moving mechanical art, it's interesting because you have kind of like an off-center movement of parts, and you have something that I find super interesting. If you move, a part in that particular way, as you do it with the Wankel engine, you get actually let's say a hand that speeds up and slows down on its path. That means the indexes, if you have say minute or hour indexes, the indexes they change in distance. So along this acceleration of the hand, the indexes have to, of course, be wider apart of each other, and then again narrower. And that's something, a notion that I find super interesting. So you have you because the mechanical part is speeding up and slowing down on its course. You have to deal with it actually reflecting this, with the indexes.
It must be a bizarre thing to witness, but also another one of those beautifully philosophical time engines that is what we come to URWERK and latterly MB&F for. This collaboration, when you first pursued it, was of course very unusual at that time, but it's becoming more and more common to see brands collaborate with one another and openly co-brand products. Earlier this year, we saw the Omega Swatch, Moon Swatch collaboration. We've seen MB&F collaborate with other brands as well, like Bulgari most recently, as far as I remember, and Moser before that. Do you have plans to do any more cross collaborations with any other brands? And if not, who would you like to work with?
I mean, we did actually use this project Only Watch in order to do collaborations, and we did there a couple of projects where we explored this a bit. It's not so easy to do it, and also maybe that's an aspect of any collaboration, that when you're actually doing it, you have positive aspects of it. That means you can somehow put your skills together, and you can create something where you bring in the best case, both worlds and the best of both worlds, to merge and to somehow to express themselves together. And it's also, what I find fascinating about it is that you have like a serialistic, like a merging of two entities. Let's say when we work together with Dune, for instance, for an Only Watch project, it's just incredibly cool to see Dune and URWERK merged. That's everybody wants to see this, I mean, like everybody in the watch world, and so this just fascinating to play this out, and then you see how you somehow work with these different characters. And of course, these are strong characters. And that maybe goes a bit to the other side of it, when you have like strong individuals, who have their clear ideas and who know exactly what they want, or have their visions and so on. It can sometimes be a bit more difficult, because they somehow then insist on their things, and they want to do it this way, that way. So it's friction, but friction, as we know now, is interesting, and that's also part of that energy that it is in something when you do it together. That friction, that the conflict, and also the in the end, when you create a piece to show that it's possible, that you can actually create something together, and the result is then visible. Hopefully in a good way. And now you ask me if you would have any further dreams of collaborating. I have to say, it's for URWERK, and that's something that I see is super positive and super. It's actually really great, and something that changes, in time. At the very beginning, we could not just select somebody, in the field or even outside the watchmaking field, for that matter. To collaborate with, but the more we get to be known, URWERK, and that's really a cool side of it, the more we can actually choose, who we want to collaborate with, and we can think about really the most, fancy or strange, collaboration partner. As I said, it doesn't even necessarily need to be in the field of watches only. And so that we can actually start to be able to pick somebody that we like, to work together with. That's really a pleasure that we didn't know at the beginning. That's something that comes along with the success, or with the fact that you're a bit known more. So this is really enjoyable. But I, of course, won't tell you, what you have in mind there, because it's coming up. But I mean, what the mind can think, I would say that.
It's obviously very common for watch companies to collaborate with car companies, but of all the brands in the world, that's probably not URWERK's best bet, because I think any driver would be so distracted by the time-telling device on their dashboard that they drive into a tree within about 5 minutes of setting up.
I certainly would know a driver who would be perfect for that. But we will see, if we end up doing this, it depends. No, but of course, it can be the more obvious things. We were really happy to at some point understand that we are on the mood board or on the inspiration board of Perini, designer of Lamborghini. That was great. We went to visit him in Bologna there, to look at the cars. He would show his designs and to understand that he's inspired by URWERK. That was really great. But also we had at some point met a Japanese gentleman who told us about his plans to create an electric car. Sadly enough, that didn't come to fruition. But that would be also something that I find interesting to somehow support, new technologies, and also be part of that development of it. But then there are also iconic, brands, in the car world that live from a mysticism or so, or from a name. That would be fascinating to work together with. So there's many things that one can find already just in this field. But I mean, there's of course other things, other worlds that are fascinating. For instance, something that we are busy with and we are working on already now is our atomic clocks. There, you have technology, or let's say technicians or physicists, in fact, who develop atomic clocks, and they're actually the contemporary watchmakers who follow that old goal to create the most precise watch or clock. And this also takes place in Switzerland, and we aligned ourselves with actually at university in Neuchâtel, where they developed these atomic modules, and we created together with them our atomic clock project, the AMC, and the atomolith, as we call it. This is like a part of URWERK where we are doing this kind of crossover with the most contemporary watch keeping or timekeeping technology, and that's also super fascinating. It then forces with creating the objects, the watches. It forces our watchmakers to somehow get familiar and comfortable with contemporary technology, and that of course includes electrics and electronics and stuff.
Let's talk about those contemporary watches for a moment. What's the most recent release that you've had for the URWERK collection?
Most recent release is in fact our UR 102. Very, in this sense, atypical, because it's like let's say, a homage that we do give to our first URWERK watch. With what we started, and we do that, of course, now because we have our 25th anniversary. Our first watch, and you started so differently when you do the first watch. Of course, this is somehow the first watch, the first thing, and you do it exactly the way you want it. You have ideas, of this, and they are somehow pure. They are not yet influenced by anything else. So they're somehow really a bit naive, obviously. And so it's interesting to then look back after a while and see what you did and somehow rethink it. And we did that together now with the first watch that we do in a frame with the Swiss Institute. That's yet another crossover in the sense, where we do work together with an art institute, so to say. I, as a young student and as a young artist, I moved to New York because New York was just a place to be. And I was really happy to have the Swiss Institute there, like an organization where young artists, could go and meet other artists. There were exhibitions, cool stuff happening in New York, maybe an exhibition on the Clock Tower building, things like that. So it was really great, but that was there an organization that helped me also with its studio, with its programs, and now we do a collaboration project with them where we will auction off this watch that we just created that actually shows a new version, a new rendition of our first UR102. And we collaborated with a young artist for that. That was suggested by the Swiss Institute to us. It's Cooper Jacobi. He's a really cool guy, young artist who works with the physical world as artists do it. But he had a really cool idea, and that is to create a display that indicates and shows temperature change. And this is a notion that is more and more important in our times. And I also found it funny because our first watches, these UR102 and 101, we presented at the Basel Fair back in the day on heating plates. To me, it's kind of cool, that he came up. I mean, totally not connected to this thing, but he came up with this idea. It's an alarming situation. We face, of course, global warming. And if you have next to time an indication that tells you about the change in temperature, it's somehow also pointing out that the temperature is something that we have to start paying attention to and be alarmed. But also, it's very beautiful at the same time. That's of course another effect of it, because you have a dial that changes its color depending on the temperature that it is facing. So if you're heating it up with your own temperature. Of course, that is then resulting in a different color. So that's a newest collaboration, first rendition of our edition of the UR 102. But another project that we just launched is actually the UR 120. It's as I always call it, it's with URWERK, we have like a kind of like evolutionary process going, because I'm working together with Felix, and he's working together with me and with our whole team on an ongoing research project, so to say. So every watch that we create somehow, as I already described it, includes all the other watches that we already did. So it's kind of like on different levels, maybe not always in the same watch, but it's kind of like a continuing process, of developing these different themes that we are interested in.
This one is really, really special. I saw this in its early prototyping stages in Geneva, in the URWERK HQ, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The numbers themselves, the blocks, actually split apart as they move around the dial. How many months or years did this contraption take for your watchmakers to conceive?
So we had actually the predecessor of the UR 120 is the UR 110, and we had at some point in time we had to stop the UR 110 because we produce around 150, a bit more now, watches a year. So we are limited in our production. So we usually have to stop a model in order to begin a new one. So this is our situation. And therefore, we had like our last 5 pieces of the UR 110 at some point, and we did like a really nice last 5 watches that were featuring a wooden intarsia shield, so to say, as the top of the watch. And it also had additional locks because we worked together with our London tailor friend Timothy Everest, who made us a cool tweed strap to the watch. And so the wood made the watch look very different, because you normally have metal. It's a very different material. Wood, is warm. It's kind of like, it's very different feelings that it triggers when you look at it. And also together with this tweed strap, it had a bit more culture, or so to say, a bit more refinement to it. It was less technical, metallic expression, and something that I really enjoyed. And based on that last piece, I developed together with the URWERK team this UR 120. But with the first piece, I saw that there's a bit too much. Actually, watch was quite thick on one end because I wanted to have it very sleek on the other. Because somehow the main thing, of course, with the watch is that we see the time indication peeking out from underneath of your sleeve. So at that end, you want to have the watch very sleek, slim, and that at the time was only possible if on the other side of the case, you had therefore a thicker case, and that I didn't like that much, actually, to be honest. But however, with the next step now, with this UR 120, the plan was to do actually again a watch, that has this sideways time indication that you can read easily. Peak when the watch is peeking out just half ways, from underneath of your sleeve, and it has this kind of orbital, mechanism that helps to guide the satellites, so to say. Talking in my jargon here. And to make the watch flatter, more ergonomic, more sleek, we had to somehow come up with an idea, and we worked on an idea to split the cubes. So if you split the cube, and you have the cube, split in two, you can of course make it just half the thickness, so that's the cool idea, and that helps us together with a few other measurements to make the watch much more sleek. And also additionally to that idea, I changed a bit something on the case. I learned actually from the Nautilus Patek and Nautilus case that I find fascinating. Cher Chanta is really, it's about watch design, of course, a designer that you can't avoid. You have to somehow learn from it, because it's if there's somebody in the field, it's definitely Cher Chanta that came up with the most contemporary or most interesting concepts. And one thing, of course, I like is, like many people, is that the way the Nautilus is actually, the case is actually put together. That gives it this special look, with these overlapping parts on the sides. I redid this, and you look at the watch, you don't think about the Nautilus, but I use the concept, and I find that fascinating, of how the case is actually screwed together. So you have the top part, and underneath part that somehow grip into each other in a special way, and then it's screwed actually together, the case from the sides, so you have actually that round edge to make the watch look like a pebble. So that was actually these two new concepts came into our UR 100 line, 110 line. So it's now the UR 120. And of course, we discovered that when the watch is doing this split, it's at the same time doing the Vulcan salute, and and we like nicknames, so we just began to call it, Spock, internally, and so, because we are Trekkies, every one of us. As you said, growing up with science fiction films, I could go into a whole other, long, rather speech, talking about our love for science fiction films and why that is. But that's definitely the case, and I would say it's for many for us human beings, it's just a part of it. We need to somehow reach out and think the future in order to plan and to adjust our path. And so science fiction films are just part of the way we see the world, right? So actually,
Yeah.
the cool ones, they are inspiring. The ones that are utopic, they are even more inspiring than the ones that just talk about scientific progress.
It's really interesting to hear you describe the case shape as a pebble. We recently spoke to Laurent Ferrier, who, of course, has this whole Galet line, which is inspired by pebbles. But I mean, when you look at that watch and you look at your watches, you couldn't get two more different interpretations of what a pebble is. And I love that about watchmaking. I've always loved that about watchmaking. And I think that that is exactly what URWERK has always brought to the table, that different way of looking at things. And talking of a different way of looking at things, I had a question come in from my former colleague Ben Hodges from Fratello, and he's a big fan of URWERK, especially the orbital models with the displays along the bottom of them. But he asks, will you ever make a display that runs from left to right rather than right to left? So the numbers going from 0 to 60 from left to right.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting question. We had to deal at some point, and I remember that vividly. We had to at some point decide how we want to do it, because it's, of course, with our time indication, it can be decided. It's both things are possible, and they don't. I don't know. The question is, how would that affect us? If it goes the other way around. And we at the time we thought it's better we go the way that time normally runs, in a regular watch. So we thought, okay, don't want to break with all the conventions and go backwards, so to say, even though, of course, that's not a backwards. But that's actually the reason why we did it. We thought, okay, no, it's the direction of the hands that the time flows. It's a convention, or somehow paying regards to somehow this other time-telling principle that we are much more familiar with. But it's absolutely true. One could do it the other way around, and up to now we didn't do it. But why not explore all the possibilities that are offered? I know from my art professor back in the day, Roman Signer, that it's actually something that he told me at some point. Be careful, don't play with too many tools. This is limit the tools you play with. So I don't know if that falls under this under this rule, but no, it's an absolutely legitimate question, and it was really together, Felix and Thomas and I, we decided at some point in time that we want to do it. We want to, count or somehow walk this way, with the time, like this, follow this direction.
Well, if you need a partner in crime to bring it to life, maybe we could agree for it to be the first real-time show special edition for a good cause. But, if you need some help.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is, that's fascinating to do this and then to find out, what does it change in the perception? Do we get from this? And usually that's my motto, to say, if you indicate time differently, then you also get a different answer by that, about what time is. That's to me fundamental. It's like if you want to be a researcher, a philosopher, or even a physicist, to understand about time, you have to use a different model. That's the way it works, and then you start understanding, a bit more about what time is, and already that, to let it run the other direction would probably trigger different, feelings. So it would be definitely interesting to do it, to find out what that would be. But there's other ways. If you have a linear indication, that's for instance something we tried out. That yet is a very different way of understanding time. If time is somehow limited to a certain moment, and then has to again fill in. So this is like a cut, a continuum in a way, even though of course it's not cut, but it's somehow adds artificially a cut in time. So these things are special. When you look at the Swiss train station clock, and you look at the second hand, you see that the second hand moves throughout its segment until it's back up at the position 12, so to say, and then it stops. The hand stops for a moment. It's just staying there. And when you look at this precisely, you think that maybe your heart stands still, because the hand doesn't move anymore, and then it jumps, with one jump, it jumps again into the new minute. And I've always found it fascinating how that somehow, if you really look at this, you think like, but these watches are super precise. This is the Swiss idea of precision, at the train station where the train is, kind of like moving like a clock. But these clocks that do indicate time at the train stations, they have this strange second that stops and stands still for way too long. So, so you have there already somehow this kind of like surrealistic moment, where time stands still. Another thing connected to this that is interesting, I know that cultures look at time like this, that if you're waiting, if you have to wait for a bus or if you have to wait for something, time stands still. It's not running. This is also an interesting notion that when you follow this belief or this concept, you're actually losing time waiting, and that's also quite freeing. If you can think, time stands still, it's not counting. So it's all about the way you look at time.
I have a zillion more questions for you. We would really love it and be honored if you come on the show again next year.
Sure, with pleasure. Absolutely.
I have such a long list. I wanted to ask you about designing watches, and Ben stole my thunder a bit. If you would ever make a ultra classic 3-hand watch, which I'm not going to ask, because you ended so philosophically on that strange train station clock, which I never understood as a kid, because that's one of an early memories I have from Switzerland. And I asked my dad, why does that clock stop? And that's another philosophical discussion why that happens. But I want to end the show because I know you need to go, but I really want to ask you this. You guys have stated, and I quote, when we innovate, we enjoy the freedom of tolerating no restrictions or taboos. Upon that quote, I want to ask you, so where does freedom in that process for Felix and Martin stop? What are the limitations? Where do you guys hit a brick wall?
Well, one has to probably admit that one's own imagination is the limit. But that can, of course, always be tested. And I would say that's exactly the reason why you are, and that's how nature does it too, in fact. That's why you are committing to an evolutionary process. So how you think, how, and that's of course a big, say, comparison that that is a bit daring. But if you look at nature started with nothing. Nature started as a molecule, but that is already pretty much in the soup, on our planet Earth, before anything was existing. And time is there truly something that one has to run through one's mind. The eons of time, the millions of years that, our nature and our planet had time to develop what it has now to show, to present to us, what we then at some point when we joined in, what we were able to face. And then we, of course, every year we are actually busy with, destroying, entities, which is a sad thing, but just saying, millions of years of evolutionary steps, small steps, next to each other, a bit like that film that I mentioned, like one image next to the other, in an endless chain of evolutionary steps, created this very crazy and beautiful and scary and incredibly varied, image of our planet. And when you look around, you have many planets that are, beautiful, maybe from far away, like Mars, white red, beautiful. But it's it's a quite sandy pit, I would say. And you can also marvel about that, because that can also look beautiful. Or if you look at another planet like Saturn or Jupiter, I don't know, even farther away. Beautiful things, but our planet is special, and we had an incredible explosion of creativity here. But that takes a lot of time, to have this variety of things. And so with URWERK, we do a bit of that, but in our very humble, small way. But I think you do it step by step, and if you do it step by step, then at some point you all of a sudden look back on an interesting development, that you wonder, how did that come about, But it's only done by this process that you're in step by step, and you also have then somehow connection, because if you do it step by step, and if you do it coherent, if you do it, one develops out of the other, if you have a consistency, or if you follow concepts or themes, with your work, you end up looking at something that can make a comment, to the time it was made in. And that's actually the main goal, that you can make a comment, even though it's a small thing. You're in the world of watches. You're not changing the world in this sense, maybe the conception or the understanding of time, if ever possible. You add something to shapes, beautiful shapes, concepts. But that's the plan.
Well, I think you've achieved it. I think URWERK has, more than any other brand I can think of, left its mark on horology quite firmly over the last 2.5 decades. Thanks for joining us, Martin. We'll definitely get you back on the show for another chat, because I think we could probably record 10 podcasts with you without any kind of rehearsal. If you would like to get in touch with us, remember you can contact me on Instagram at RobNuds, that's ROBNUDDS, and you can contact Alon at Alon Ben Joseph, that's ALONBENJOSEPH, or you can send us direct emails either at rob@therealtime.show or alon@therealtime.show. We'll be back next week. Until then, stay safe and keep on ticking.